Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I'm Amy Erickson. I'm the director here at Angels Gate Cultural Center, just one cog in an amazing team that bring art to the South Bay, and we're so excited to have you here with us. We look forward to a wonderful evening where you're going to be able to talk about art and art process, the artist process. And if anything of the last 30 minutes told me you're in for a treat of an evening. Um, we are going to give you a chance to ask questions of the artists and Peggy, our host, as we go through the evening. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. In that Q&A, we'll be able to pull those questions down, and I'll jump in with my voice and share some of them as we go through the conversation this evening. We look forward to a wonderful evening with all of you, and remind you that great things are happening up at Angels Gate Cultural Center. We hope that you'll come and join us for any of the many upcoming events, including Sound Pedro, Family Art Workshop, and of course, our big 40th anniversary event with our fundraiser, Awake in Color. We'll put those dates in the chat so you have them for later, and we look forward to talking to you at the end, just to share a couple more things about Angels Gate Cultural Center. Now, I would like to take the honor of bringing to the stage some amazing people. Peggy Reavey, our host, and our three wonderful artists, Harold Greene, Michael Davis, and Eric Johnson. Please come on, and I will get out of the way. You guys have a great talk.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to Studio Soup. My name's Peggy Reavey. Studio Soup is a place where artists get together and talk about their working process, what goes on in their head, their heart, their studio, or outside the studio. These three artists certainly work outside the studio too. What goes on with them as they move from the spark of an idea to its fulfillment. And tonight we have three wonderful San Pedro artists. And you know, it really is amazing how many staggeringly talented people we have in this little fishing village of ours. It's really terrific, and I'm glad to have you here. We have Michael Davis, who is a sculptor. He sees himself largely as a minimalist, but his work is quite detailed and often is layered with found objects from the past and the future. And Harold Greene, who I would say makes sculptural furniture as well as musical instruments, which he also plays. And Eric Johnson, who makes sculpture of wood and resin that kind of curves and shines like the cars in the auto body shop were originally trained, his dad's auto body shop. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Great to be
Michael
here.
Davis, Michael Davis, yeah, you have said that you experienced severe dyslexia as a child, and that may have shaped your way of apprehending reality and perhaps your working process as an artist. Can you comment on that? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I'd like to have Cecilia bring up slide 2 or image 2. And that's actually correct. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles. I started we're seeing a lot of images come up here.
Yeah.
But I started going to a local elementary school there, and they discovered that I had dyslexia. And because of that, I sort of had this learning ability for some time. In fact, I think I still struggle with that. But I have to say there's several words that I'd like to put in here and thoughts. And one, my mother worked at a library across the street from the high school that I went to, and I did a lot of time doing research in libraries. And I love the fact that I could look something up, I could follow a thread, I could find an idea. And I really started to love dictionaries and encyclopedias. My father bought an encyclopedia very early on. And I love looking at the pictures in those. And it gave me insight into kind of a world that I discovered of symbols and signs and relationships of colors and all types of things that were like patterns. I started to think of this as a language of sort, and it continues to this moment. And so I show this piece because this is sort of a culmination. It was done about I'm trying to get the exact date because it was redone in 2010, but it was 2005. And it has a number of symbols that you might see in medicine and in astronomy and other types of objects on that have multiple reads. And I grew up with a father who was also an avid prospector in my early years. Mm. And so hanging in there are a series of 50 assayer cups that I picked up in Randsburg. And there's other things in that sculpture that reference things in my past, objects from my past, and objects also that I'd found. And I wanted to make pieces that acted sort of like signifiers of various things that you could have multiple reads on them. So I might read it one way, but somebody else might read very, very different. And I like that sort of cultural interplay that you have with signs and symbols.
Okay, yeah, that is really interesting. And yet you call it 1956.
Right.
And that was, as you said, was an era when, you grew up during the Cold War.
Correct.
And that's was a big part of your experience in that. And I liked the image of someone down the block. You recall someone having they dig a big hole and they lower a bomb shelter into the hole.
True. Well, what happened, I feel 1956 is a pivotal year in the kind of the erasing of the optimism that we were moving forward as a country, because at that moment, the next year, the Sputnik went up and it changed everything. It changed how we talked about education, how we talked about our place in the world order. And it talked about just this, where were we actually? And I remember a scene walking down the street on Haledon and Downey with all the doors open, street light coming out from every one of the homes, and all we could hear was the beep of the Sputnik. It was an amazing thing. And we were captivated by the object. It was, no bigger than like a basketball, but you could actually see it go across the sky. And it was an amazing thing. And right now, we're in one of those same kinds of moments.
Yeah.
We're in this new Cold War, and it's not a Cold War, it's a warm war. So those types of politics have sort of driven my work for a long time as well.
It looked like there were some Sputniks hanging off of that that last
well, there's globes.
Sculpture you showed, yeah.
There's globes that hang off that, and some are painted black, and others have objects. There's a series of frames from personal images, but they're minus their image. There's a mirror in those, and there's also a silhouette of Susan's, my wife's sister.
Yeah, well, and another thing that you is interesting to me about you is that you've got this thread of the little white boy growing up in Downey during the Cold War, and also your passion for Mexico, Mexican art, Mexican culture, which is also, I think, shows in your work.
If Cecilia could bring up number one, actually, the Montes HQ, which I believe is number one, yeah. This is a piece that I did in 1979, and it was shown at the Newport Harbor Art Museum, which is now the Orange County Art Museum. But I was interested in in perception, which has been sort of another theme of my pieces for many, many years. And there's objects within this structure. The structure was placed in the desert and allowed to weather and to change along with the other objects for many, many months. And it was called Monte's HQ in reference to a film that I saw about Monte fighting in the desert in was it Ethiopia, I guess, in northern Africa. And I was curious to put this piece out because during that period of time, there was devices that were built that acted as camouflage elements. And that structure that you see on the lower image is what's called a wedge work. And there was 3 wedge work pieces here that acted as devices, models for devices that might be made in large scale as deceptive elements that might exist in a desert environment.
So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not understanding. I mean, is that the interior of the
You're
one
looking,
on top?
the bottom image, you're actually inside that structure looking out at the desert in Joshua Tree.
Okay.
And the object on the right really was influenced by travel to Mexico because there's a certain expediency that happens when objects come together. A bottle cap can become an attachment for a fence. Tar paper can be something used entirely not for a roof. It could become some other element or part of a floor. I just love that nature, the way things are done and transported, the appropriateness of the material at the moment used to solve a problem. And I just love that part of Mexican culture and what they do with very little in some cases.
Michael,
Right.
when you were referring to Monty, was that Monty Montgomery?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Oh.
I'm not going to go into all detail of that. I had a film called, I wanted to make a film called Monte's,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to say. It was looking down at his derriere. It was going to be called Monte's butt.
Right.
But it had to do with relationship with him and Eisenhower during that particular time. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of the camouflage elements that he was bringing into that.
Cool. So Harold.
Yes.
Yes, you. One of the things you said in an interview of you that I read was that I know that you work often on commission where you collaborate somewhat with the client.
Yes.
But it's not only your artistic vision, but also you say you want the tree to speak. And I'm wondering, can you please talk about that, what that's about in your process and how that came to be?
Yes. This goes back to when I was really small. I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I had an older brother who we would hang out, and we would go to this wood factory a couple of blocks up from my house. We lived in the projects in Harbor City at the time. This would have been 1956. And we would collect scraps of wood and bring them back and turn them into our own toys. So we made, cars and trucks and trains and stuff, just with crude tools and scrap wood. And then, so the making of things from salvage material was something that happened very early. And then moving forward to when I was maybe 7 or 8 and living in San Pedro, I had a tree house outside, which I would climb up into all the time. And it was kind of like a whole other world. You can look down at the cars going by on Summerlin. Later, some years later, the street was widened and they cut down that tree. Okay. And so I didn't know this, but my mom saved some pieces of that tree. And when I was in my early 20s, she says, "Hey, I got these pieces of wood back in the back, and maybe you want them. They're from the tree." It was an acacia tree. And I hadn't started woodworking yet, but I started cutting into that wood, and the wood was really hard. It was acacia. It's almost like a rosewood, deep chocolate brown with black stripes and kind of purplish reddish streaks in it. And I found it to be just an amazing wood that took a really fine polish. And I started making objects out of that tree. So these are objects made from the tree that I had my tree house in as a child. I still have one small piece of that wood that I've saved from then. So, I mean, we're talking, the tree was probably 60 or 70 years old when I was first had my tree house in it. So it's like probably well over 100 years old. That sparked the idea that there were these trees that were out there on the street that were that had valuable material in them. And so I began seeing trees as a great source of material, and people were always cutting them down, or they were always falling down. And so early on, that became a real part of my woodworking, finding trees, milling the wood, drying it, and making furniture out of it. And it's a real complete process. It's a process that I value to this day.
You don't just go to Home Depot to get your lumber.
No, it's it's kind of now it's like there's a network of friends and colleagues that will alert me when a tree is being cut down, and sometimes it's like, it's being cut now, you better get over here. And so a lot of times I have to go and negotiate for the wood. Generally, there's a contractor who's paid to cut it as small pieces as possible and cart it away as quickly as possible. And sometimes I have to convince them that if you cut, a larger piece of it, I can mill it and turn it into something beautiful. A lot of times it doesn't work out. There was one time there was this magnificent tree. It was an English walnut on 20th Street near the old McCowan's Market, the property belonged to the McCowans, and they hired a couple of guys to take this tree out. I mean, this tree was so big, the canopy covered 2 houses, and the trunk was probably 4.5 to 5 feet in diameter. It was massive. And so I went and talked to these guys, a couple of young guys. They were in their 20s, and I says, "Hey, I'd like to buy this wood from you." I mean, English walnut is like one of the best woods. It's rare to get in this area, and it's just valuable for its working properties and its beauty and everything. And I offered him, I offered him 500. They said no. I offered him $1,000. They said no. What happened is people started coming and buying the pieces that they were cutting. They were buying it as firewood. And I got up to $1,500, and they says, "No, hey, we're making money, And so I went back the next day, and all that was left was the trunk of it. Okay, it was literally 5 feet in diameter, and it was about 7 or 8 feet high. It was still in the ground, and I went back a couple of days later, and there was a guy whose job it was to clear the lot. And he took the tree out he wrapped it up with a chain, and he pulled it out with this big tractor. And I went and talked to him. I said, "Hey, I'll buy this log from you." He goes, "No, I got this guy, and he's going to make gun stocks or whatever out of it." And I just couldn't convince him. And so the tree was gone. A year later, I was wandering around the street near where the old Big C lumber was, back up that street. I forget what it's called.
Mariposa?
And there was a vacant lot with a lot of junk, and that same stump in that vacant lot just kind of rotting and decomposing. And at that point, it was no longer of any value. The most disappointing thing ever.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well, we have pictures here of things
Yes.
that weren't disappointing. You want to talk about some of these?
Yeah, a lot of things that I do are inspired by nature. This is a Torrey Pine store. It's a place that I visit fairly often. And I wanted to get something that kind of captured the beauty of the California coast and that part of the coast. And there's some artistic license there, but I wanted to get the movement, and the wind and the fact that it's the edge, the edge of the continent. And cypress wood is the wood that the panel is carved out of, and the frame of the door is mahogany. So it's a really great wood. I've done a series of doors like that. There's another door. You can bring up number 16, the underwater detail of the Torrey Pine of the underwater door. So this is a view. I have to give my wife credit, because this is what she sees when she's ocean swimming out there at Cabrillo Beach, and she wanted a door that reflected the underwater view, and so that's a seaweed and a striped bass swimming around it. So I try to use the chisels to create a kind of a texture, almost like the flow of water around these things, which you can't usually see in real life, but I try to create that kind of movement. But doors are seem to be a staple of what I do, but mostly, like you say, commission work. People come to me and I collaborate with them on creating something that we're both happy with.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And that the tree likes too.
Yes.
So Eric Johnson, you are an extremely prolific sculptor and in resin and wood, and you started doing this kind of work when you were 39. You often emphasize that, and you were a painter before that. I have to say it was probably, and you were really good at it. I've seen your work, and you could just sit down and do it. And now it's very physical. You guys all do very physical work. You use tools. You're lifting things, moving things around in a way that someone who is painting a picture usually doesn't. And so that was a big change for you, Eric. And I imagine you must have been very excited about the resin and wood to do it.
Yeah, it was interesting how I got started, because, being a painter, I never thought I was a very good painter. I enjoyed what I did, but I was painting objects, and a friend of mine, I was petting one of the paintings of a teacup one time, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I'm petting it." He goes, "Why are you petting it?" "Because I want to feel it." And he goes, "Well, you can make a three-dimensional one." I was like, "Really?" I didn't, I thought it was, that's what I thought I was supposed to paint. So I immediately made a huge teacup out of Tony DeLapp's scraps. I was a studio assistant for him at the time. And the sculpture just came really, really fast to me, because I'd worked with tools, making hot rods and working on cars my whole life. I brought a couple of things today, and this is kind of ties into it. I like, all the three of us, these are geometric pieces on the, we'll bring up image 29, please. I wanted to show you something interesting. See that piece in the back is titled Mahis, and it's what a piece of corn looks like when you break it in half. It has that structure on the inside. Well, the other day I was looking around, and I realized that I have one of my favorite artifacts, like from the second grade, that I made. And it just keeps reoccurring in the work. Now, I think that's probably more poignant that I give credit on researching it about, but it seems like a lot of the work that I do now, not early on. Now, if we can go back to image number 22, and you'll see that, yeah, this piece, this is a series of several pieces. The one in the middle, that's a horizontal, is Morse code, and it says dark money. That's about as political as I can get visually. But all the other pieces were actually cross sections of a lot of the images. Like if you go to image number 25, it'll show you. So those would be sections out of that to make the grids. I wanted to see how the structure would be on a continuous smooth plane. You know, being interested in wave patterns and physics, that's what was driving that part.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to me that all you guys, I think, are math and science nerds.
Well, interestingly enough, when Michael said that he was dyslexic, I go, of course you are. I'm just seriously dyslexic as well. And I couldn't really make it through school. I got held back twice. And then when I was at UC Irvine, one of the counselors figured out that I was dyslexic, and then told all the teachers that I could take all my tests orally. And so in several of the classes, I got the highest grade in the classes because I could comprehend it. You know, I couldn't do it otherwise. This is the slide that's up right now is a drawing in the, you know, from the early painting part. When I was at UC Irvine and doing a lot of traveling, going to New York and back. But I really wanted to make these objects. You can even see here that I wanted to make it three-dimensionally.
Yeah.
And I did make this piece, but I wasn't happy with it. But I don't think we're ever really happy with what we do. You know, we kind of like it. I don't know about the other guys, but what I do in the studio is when I make something or complete it, unless it goes to a show or something, I hide it. And so a lot of times when people come to the studio and they're like, well, where's your art? And I go, well, it's kind of all over the place. Like this piece was at the Armory, and I keep wanting to point at it, you know, to show you, because like you can see my hand pointing at it. It goes through the wall in both sides. And if you're on the that right view where it has the shadow under it, if you go on the other side of both of those walls, it is an opening. It's holes in the wall.
Oh, that's great.
And that whole body of work was about us as artists. When we do a show in a gallery or museum, they give us that proverbial white box. And I was thinking one day, well, what if we just omitted the box and let's own everything that's outside of it? So I start putting wormholes, you know, through to the outside. And I did a body of work where I had these connected with tubes from one wall all the way around to the other. So if people were standing on the other side of the gallery, you could hear them perfectly from this other place. And that was an interesting body of work.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, what about this? You keep referring to physics and all that kind of stuff. I really am interested in how you guys, because as a girl who had to have 2 outside tutors to pass 11th grade algebra, I am fascinated with you know, it goes against the stereotype in my mind that artists are
Well, I can tell you
are
simply,
science and math geniuses, but they are. I mean, look at you know, Da Vinci obviously was pretty good at it. So you
well, I
know.
guess it's what we're driven to. And when I was in the 2nd grade, I was walking home. I went to 13 different grammar schools, and this was in Canoga Park, I remember. And it occurred to me that the distance that you have, every time it gets cut in half, it gets smaller and smaller. But I kind of figured out that it can never, ever reach the smallest part. And there's a law in physics that states that.
Yeah, Zeno's, right?
I can't remember.
I think it is, but I don't think it's legitimate. That's what I was always
Well,
told.
it has
Anyway,
to be
go ahead.
legitimate. So I started thinking at that time, if the world is as big as we perceive it at that time, this is like 1956, Michael, it's that time when Sputnik all of that stuff really opened up doors. It's the, post duck and cover. And
Yeah.
if it's that big and it's that small, are we somewhere in the middle? And as a child, when you don't have a lot of responsibility of, working and doing that, you get a chance to really, free float and think about that stuff. And I allowed that stuff to come into the work when I started doing sculpture.
Well, this is Amy. I want to jump in for a second. We have
Okay.
some questions out here, and really interesting. I'm not sure where in the middle I am, so I have questions about that. But for all of you, especially seeing Eric's book from college, how do you proceed after that first spark of an idea? What is your prep or your research like after that first spark of an idea?
Well, that's the crazy part about sculpture, and these guys will tell you that the ideas are really cheap. You get an idea happens just at the blink of an eye, and then all of the rest of it is labor. So what you really only have to think about, you have to think about scale. You want to think about what it means to you, what you're trying to project to anybody else, and it sort of takes a life of its own. And you might change it through the middle of it, but it pretty well is established within seconds of its conception.
Are we all in agreement? What's the deal here? You said 3 individuals. You must have slightly different points of view.
I feel a somewhat kinship to both of them when you have to make something, because there's quite a bit of expense to make something sometimes, and you want to make sure you don't screw it up in the process. So I start off doing a lot of drawings, and if Cecilia could bring up image 4 on mine, the elliptic loom. I'm fortunate that I have both a studio and a public art practice. And this is a project that was done for Metro MOS2, which was the station at Vermont and Highland. And I want to show it in relationship to what we were just talking about, because when I was awarded the commission to work, this was the second series of subway stations that were done in Los Angeles, and each station had art. When I was selected and the architect came to town, we had not met. We just met in an interview process. And he said to me, Michael, why don't you set the design theme for the entire station? And I thought, well, this is a building that's 40 stories high, that's laying diagonally in the ground, 110 feet below the surface. And it's kind of daunting when you start thinking about that in terms of scale. But I started to draw up every single element that they used, especially in this down in the bottom part of the subway, just to get an idea of what it could be. And so the process began with sketches and things like that, but I finally at the end gave the architect some very detailed sketches of how this whole constellation sky went together and how that integrated into the entire design scheme of the project. And it came out fairly successful, I think, in terms of transforming the space into this traveling spaceship underneath the ground, traveling through space and time. Because when you get down there, you're pretty disoriented. So I wanted something that would sort of have this bridge that you could look out and see this landscape, as it were, this celestial landscape.
Yes, a lot of drawings. You do a lot of drawings in advance.
I had to do a lot of drawings. In fact, I do drawings for every single project that I do, and I'm constantly drawing. And Eric's right. The ideas come cheap. I mean, I can do a quick drawing, but the next phase is trying to figure out how it's built. And almost all of the public art projects that I've done, I've actually done all the drawings for them and submitted those to the engineer. And then there are some corrections or things that have to be done at that point, but it's quite a process. But it actually came from the studio practice of doing that same thing.
So,
Speaking of drawings,
yeah, go ahead.
I draw everything as well. Generally, in doing commission work, which is 90% of what I do, I'll sit with the client at the first meeting and sketch out some very quick sketches of what I perceive that they want in their home. And so I might, I always have a notebook, and I do these sketches, and I will get feedback from that person as, am I getting closer to what you want? I have notebooks that go all the way back to 1980. In many cases, many of those drawings were never built. But the ones that do go on to be actually made in wood, the series of drawings continues. The designs continue at my studio. I send them drafts of the drawings, and I get feedback from them. And until we get to a final measured drawing, and then wood samples with finish, and then a price is agreed upon, and begin to build. So that's basically
A lot
the
of
process.
like, collaboration is part of what you do and part of what Michael does often. And I know that with Eric, you have definitely, you've had the whole community come in your studio
that was
to work.
I'm different than both these guys in this manner. When I stopped painting and drawing and I started doing sculpture, I actually couldn't go back to drawing. It was the two-dimensional lie theory, and syndrome or whatever. And I just never felt comfortable because I've introduced a wave element into my work where it turns and twists. What I do draw is I draw the templates and the things that I work with that I rotate.
Right.
That would be the limit, to my drawing. I have several things like that, and then the jigs that I make, which I'm sure Harold is really familiar with.
Oh yeah.
To put pieces in and to where they need to rotate, and where they go to their next element and then their turn and their turn and their turn, because you can really get involved and you can get excited about the process you're doing and kind of lose track when you're making something.
Well, yeah, and Eric, when you had all these people coming in and making the maze project, maybe you were.
That was free labor.
Yeah, I know, but let seriously.
Yeah.
You do have a very strong sense of community, and you're very comfortable with people. I mean, coming into your studio even while you're working, and those pieces you made, you made them so everybody could participate.
Right there. If you can bring up color plate 29, it'll show you. So back in 2007 or 2006, I made a single piece. This is 378 individual pieces about the size, a little bigger than a football. And I got that idea. I was like, wow, this would be really nice if it was a piece of corn, a piece of maize corn, because I have Indian blood in me. It doesn't show. And I wanted to really talk about Indian corn. I wanted to talk about corn and its entire development and plight and Monsanto and all of that sort of stuff. But then I realized that I could only make one every 3 or 4 days. So I got an idea and I made a gimbal. That's in the video that we can show at some point.
Yeah, well, why don't you,
if that can come up at some point. It's a rotating gimbal, and I would have 12 pieces on one of them and 5 in another. So every 3 days we would make 17 pieces, and then we had to do it. So I invited people from all over the world. People came. It was really fabulous. And, notable people that we know, that Michael knows, and Harold, Dwayne Valentine, Craig Kaufman, all of those guys, Peter Alexander, all of those guys came and had fun. And I always we had a real great barbecue. We had fun. I let them pick their color. It just had to, you guys know this, when you get an idea that you really like, it has to get completed. You can't give up, and that's that thing that I tell young artists. I go, if you get an idea and then you go, oh, that's too much work, then you're not meant to be doing this at all. you need to complete that idea. You have to find the solution. So it took 3 years, and then I have it now. It's storage.
I went to that exhibit in Torrance
Me too,
and,
me
saw,
too.
and saw that it was fantastic
Thank you
in
very much.
person, just fantastic.
Thank you.
I want to add that the metro station I showed is one of those processes where you really have to involve the community in the process, because
Yeah.
there's just this incredible team. But what was interesting is that started in 2000 or 1993 and ended
Wow.
in 1999. And was
Wow.
dedicated. So, and one of the last projects I worked on for the city of Ventura, a project that I redesigned the California Bridge, took 13 years. In fact, it took so long, they forgot actually who did it.
I hope you reminded them.
Well, they actually found some stuff, and I touched base with them, and I was actually the person that the contractors and things would call, because I was the lead on it. And they finally got wise to that and said, oh, this guy must have something to do with this bridge. And I designed the entire bridge. But
Yep.
13 years is a long time to
It
be
is, yeah.
dedicated into something. But I agree. You just have to persevere,
In the 90s, I started trying to do, public art, outdoor art. And what I found out immediately was that to meet a deadline, you'd have to use your own money to start. And then there's always setbacks of one way or another. And it just wasn't for me. It just didn't work out.
Well, Michael, I have to thank Michael Davis for introducing me to the world of public art. But that was one thing that he said. He says, look, we might be talking about this now, but nothing really will even begin to happen until about 5 years. And then he was absolutely right. Probably the average time for the public art pieces I've done is, I'm going to say 7-8 years. That's about average, which turned out to be pretty fast, as a matter of fact.
Well,
But,
some are fast and some are slow. I mean, some only take just a few years and you get them done, but others, yeah, and they become more complex. A project for the Bronx that I did for Raphael Vanoli in the Bronx in New York. They found out because 9/11 stopped everything, there was a 4-year wait to redesign the whole building, and they actually were building the building underneath or over a highway, and decided that a bomb might be able to put underneath that building. And now we're building a museum in Los Angeles that is the same condition. So it's kind of strange. You don't know what's going to hit you. It's a side.
No.
Get kind of blindsided sometimes.
Yep.
So what about, I know that you probably all work in various forms of resin. I know Eric does. And being married to a contractor, I'm aware that you can't use the same kind of resin that you used a few years ago because it's against the law. Isn't that right? I mean, does that alter your way of working, that it has to be water-based now, or doesn't it?
Well, no, not at all. I chose specifically for the longevity of the material a 249A, which is a surfboard resin and boat resin. I figured when they stop making boats and surfboards, then I'll be in trouble. But it's difficult to get, especially for COVID. It went up about 5 times as much. And the first batch that I got, you guys, you probably understand, they didn't have enough cobalt in it. And cobalt is a promoter. That allows the catalyst later to rob the electrons from the resin and create the heat and make it cure. And it took forever. It took a really long time, like a half a day for that resin to go off, and it was really difficult. But the good part about it is it made some creative things happen in the resin that I had never achieved before. And I got compliments for it. And I go, well, I can't take all the credit for this. Yeah.
So when it takes a really long time to cure like that, then I guess that's a good, then you use that machine or that you made?
Yeah, the way I mix the resin is I put far too much catalyst in it. If you were to leave it in the pot, the cup, it would catch on fire and burst in flames. But because I put it in centrifugally and move it around centrifugally, that it's only about less than a 16th of an inch thick. So it gets quite hot, but then it cools down quickly. And I have to wait about a half an hour between each coat. And sometimes the coats can be up to 18 to 26 coats.
So what about your, if I wanted to ask, one of you guys may have a question. Did you want to ask something, Harold?
Speaking of resin, I have used some of the water-based resins, and they seem to work pretty well. I do prefer the oil-based resins. I recently completed a project where I needed a clear resin to cover some panels, and it was the oil-based stuff, and it's a great material. It's a great material to work with. I don't get to do the kind of free form. I'm actually kind of envious of you, Eric, being able to do these free form shapes from your imagination. I made a commitment early on to build things that were practical. And I've held to that for almost 40 years. But every once in a while, I think, wow, what it would be like to make something that would be totally useless and, just.
That's your goal.
Yeah.
Do it. Yeah, that's your goal.
Yeah, there you go. And beautiful to look at.
Right.
I take that as a compliment.
It is.
I think that a lot of materials, a lot of things have changed over the last few years in terms of working with almost any material, and then the price of materials have escalated drastically here in time. And I've been making these pieces dealing with rare earth. I mean, getting into materials.
Right, yeah.
And I've been thinking about those things and making them for some time now. And we're in that process of rare earth being this commodity that's a valuable commodity in the world, and it's doing a great deal of damage environmentally and socially where these things are being done. And I'm glad Cecilia put up this piece of Rio Tinto mine. It's in Madagascar, but this is a piece that's 34 inches in diameter. And it's sort of a combination of materials that are signifiers for me, and they reference various cultures, and they reference various materials that are, to me, symbols of wealth and privilege. So this is an aerial view from space of the Rio Tinto mine that is in Madagascar.
Wow.
That people have been protesting now for years. And so you were about, 35, 40 miles looking down at this thing from space. So you can see the immensity of the project. So this material is being mined and destroying a lot of the ecology in that area. And I want to show one other that's number 8. This is a series of pieces that are overlaid with fabrics and other types of wallpaper designs. And I found a series of wallpaper books that were very expensive wallpaper, something that I could never afford to have on my walls. And I mixed that with juxtaposition with oilcloth and things that I got in my travels or in my search for exotic materials in various kind of low-end fabric stores. And I put those in combination with these aerial images to get the juxtaposition of this material and the people that work in those mines, and some of these referencing that history as well as the history of who might be the owners of these mines. And then also I add another element of gold or some other element that really strikes of a kind of a material that is historically been considered an element of wealth. So
Oh, beautiful.
this material, if you follow the paper recently, there's been many articles on cobalt. When Eric mentioned cobalt as this drawing factor, this heating factor in the process, it's being mined. It's now being considered to be mined undersea and in various locations. We need to really kind of rethink everything here from that. I wish you all guys, I wish everybody that was watching this had 3D glasses. You could see this, how these objects pop out. And that's sort of a reference to that time period in 1956 where this type of naivete and this type of theatricality on a very analog basis was popular and kind of still is. So,
Michael, thanks so much for referencing that. I pulled up my 3D glasses that are on my desk and got to see one again.
you can see it on the screen, correct?
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah.
Fabulous.
It's great. I have a couple more questions if I could throw a couple in.
Please.
From the audience, they were wondering for Harold, but I would say for any of you, where is the best place to see your work? And then I'll come back with another one.
Right now, I don't have anything publicly on display. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. I post projects in progress, and my Instagram is harold.greene. Make sure you put the E at the end of Greene. I show a lot of process photos of what I'm doing, a lot of details of me using tools. That's the best place to see my work. If you live in San Pedro, you can see my work at the downtown harbor area. There's 4 massive tables and benches right there in the downtown harbor, just to the north of the Maritime Museum. And also the Ghost Fish Plaza. There's some of my furniture there in and around Utro's restaurant. Okay. And if you're ever in the San Pedro, it's the Harbor Community Clinic. It's a brand new clinic on 5th and Pacific. There are 2 large artworks in the main lobby, one in the pediatric section, and they are both donor walls honoring the people who gave money to build that clinic. So that's where you can see stuff in person. But Instagram and my website, you can just Google my name and you can find my website.
Thanks so much. Eric, can you share with us where we'd find you?
Yeah, Instagram would be the best. I have a website, but I don't know how to update it, so it's been a while. We're working on that. Instagram, I try to give the best I can of what I'm doing, or tracing back in some historical pieces. A friend of mine, Walter Modena, is documenting and all my work that I've done that we can find, and he's in the process of getting this all available. I don't have anything. I don't have any place. The gallery system has really gone belly up. And I showed a couple galleries, but it's not a place you can really go. That's the studio is about it. And one person, Nora Mae Munster, who lives in town here, she has 5 pieces of mine. And so we can go to Nora's Mae's house.
Good.
And what is your Instagram handle, Eric, so I can share that with
I think it's ericjohnsonstudio.com.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I have another question, just because I'm the musician in the family up here. Harold, tell me about what came first, making musical instruments or making wood art, the studio art?
I think, well, in terms of chronology, I was a musician much earlier than I was a woodworker. I began playing music when I was 15, playing guitar, and I began woodworking when I was maybe 23, 24. But they have kind of come together lately. I'm going to say the last 5 or 6 years, where I'm building more musical instruments. In this case, primarily electric basses. This is one that I built for myself. It's a 5-string electric bass, short scale, a semi-hollow body, and it has a lot of the elements that an acoustic guitar, classical acoustic guitar has. It has a spruce top. It has maple back, actually quilted maple, and just a variety of hardwoods. Ziricote is the fretboard. There's inlays of ebony and holly that are the fret dots. And it's an instrument that actually sounds pretty good even when it's not plugged in. So I've been doing a series of basses. I have a series going right now. If you check out my Instagram, you can see the progress on a set of 4 basses that I'm building. And in this case, for the first time, I'll be using local wood in the instruments. Actually, Brazilian pepper will be featured. The same wood and the same tree as the pepper chair, which is number 11. And that's another piece built from salvaged wood. So I'm kind of coming full circle and using salvaged wood to build musical instruments that I play.
Thank you so much, Harold. I actually am hoping Cecilia will bring up the string of pearls because I have a question for you, Eric. Was this a hobby turned into art, or can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Oh my goodness, I did want to talk about this piece. It was another vision. What I wanted to do is I was really being in foster homes and going to 13 grammar schools and living with every kind of family imaginable. I was certainly exposed to as many religions, and I wanted to make a huge rosary. And then when I figured out the scale I wanted and how many beads are on a rosary, that was certainly out of the question. So I figured what I would do is I would do a pearl necklace, and each sphere is 12 inches in diameter, and then the centerpiece. So this piece took 5 months. The funny part about it, and then it went into the canals for 2 days. It was lovely. The reflection were incredible. It was fine. And I got home and my wife patted me on the shoulder and she goes, "That's a really nice piece. I don't want you to ever do that again." Because I was away from the house literally for 5 months. That's how long it took to make all of these pieces and put it all together. So I now have it in a big box, like, what do you, it's the thing. It's like, Michael, what do you do with this stuff? And Harold,
I thought it was a piece of public art.
Oh gosh, no. No, I make stuff because I really want to, and I figure out how to do it.
Sure.
Now, how I keep myself alive a lot of times is I restore other people's art. Peter Alexander and Kaufman and all those guys and Ron Davis. I restore their work, and that pays for me making my work.
What are those balls made out of? What are the pearls made out of?
They're resin. They're white resin. First, I put in a couple coats of clear to get a nice clear coat. Like, the neat thing about resin is it can be more impressive than any car paint job you've ever seen, because the clear coat can be an inch thick. You can have that depth, and all that depth came from, all of the resin stuff came in my mind from water. When I used to go trout fishing with my uncles, and being dyslexic and colorblind, I could see the trout. And I always wondered, why do they always want me to go along? When you're 5, 6 years old and they're digging you out of bed to go on a fishing trip, well, I could spot the fish. So the whole idea of, the physics, but then water has just been such a signifier. I'll use Michael's word there, because that's a really good way to explain what that means to us as artists, because it's really hard to explain to people that are not familiar with your work or your process, why are they doing that? You know, and it's so important to show the process, like on Harold's Instagram page, you get to see his process, which is important before you can see the end result.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to see all of the pieces and have you talk about all the pieces that you have on
Well, I was
here.
hoping that each one of us could do that if we could
Yeah,
run
I,
through, start out wherever you want. You know, maybe Michael, I guess, because he was
yeah,
he's
Michael,
the lead.
I know we haven't seen
he's
all
the
of
lead on
yours.
this.
Yeah, there's a few that haven't been seen or really, I mean, they've been seen, but really haven't been talked about, like number 3. If Cecile could bring that up, please. This is a piece that I did in 1994 and then redid it in 2016 for sort of a mini kind of, not so much of a retro, but just sort of looking back at several pieces that Susanna Myers did at El Camino College, and there's a catalog available for this piece. And I scavenged with a friend of mine, Nick Agate, for years. We went out to local junkyards, which now are no longer in the Wilmington area. And all those trophy parts came from barrels of discarded cast trophy pieces. And I love the reference to it because, you know, they're broken and they're damaged or they're half cast, but it's like these dreams that didn't quite get realized, and you still got a trophy for them in a way. And below that is this vanity table, and on the vanity table, this is all motorized, and this mirror rocks back and forth. The sort of cast figure here slowly does a turn counterclockwise on the glass, the green glass mirror. And this little piece here is a bottom. I don't know if you can see my cursor, probably not, but the bottom, there's an image of,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, this piece, if you move, yeah, the little tiny box right here next to the mirror to the left. Yeah, that is an etched piece of granite with an elongated 1956 atomic hydrogen bomb blast.
Oh, so
And
when you talk about the mirror, what mirror?
there's a mirror sitting on top of the vanity. You can just see it.
Oh, okay, I see.
And
Yeah.
what it does, it makes a reflection of an arc as if it's sort of this blast image onto you can't see this in this image. And this entire background is what my mom called Oriental wallpaper. And I never was comfortable with the word, even though she wanted to put this Oriental wallpaper in her bathroom. So I decided to use that image and make it into this kind of reference to a kimono.
Yeah.
And that's on the wall. And what happens if you have your 3D glasses, this centerpiece with the trophy parts pop out from the wall, because I'm sort of interested in how perception works. It pops out about 3 or 4 feet. You almost feel like you can put your arm around it.
Wow.
It's quite an incredibly beautiful illusion, and well, it's poignant in terms of its reference back to Nagasaki and
Sure.
Japan.
Michael, I have several hundred 3D viewers that you can have.
I have several hundred myself. Thank you. And the other image, just to not take up too much time, is
No. Okay.
I don't know how much time we have, but I want everybody else to have time on this. But this is Dorak's Dream, and in our sort of preview, Eric made a comment about this piece, and it's an interesting piece. I did a number of these circular metal pieces with objects that were suspended off, found gears and copper pieces and various other types of exotic materials were formulated into these pieces, which I called rings. But Dorak's Dream is kind of unique because the aluminum element is actually a turbo that came out of a machine that Dorak was making to try to make floating elevated cars and vehicles. He was a NASA and a Douglas and a engineer of the early space age.
Hmm.
And he had a studio that Nick Agate actually rented from, a huge studio space in Torrance. So I was awarded this piece when they closed down the studio space. We were able to get this piece. Nick was able to get it from the owner
Yeah.
and give it to me.
I really respond to that turbine quite a bit.
It's a beautiful piece of engineering. It's amazing.
Wow.
And then that blue is this incredible ultramarine blue from Fletcher paint that's dead flat. And I really like the relationship. And in a way, Eric, this piece is a reference in a way to, I'm drawing a blank on your studio assistant for
Tony DeLapp.
Tony DeLapp.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a reference back to Tony DeLapp and his minimal way of going about making pieces.
Which is a reference to him for Ellsworth Kelly too. There was a lot of.
Hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then I like to do pieces in series of 3s or 5s, and I guess that goes back to my interest in uneven numbers. But I did a series of pieces. This is called Gold. There's another piece that's similar in design and shape called Silver, and there's another one called Bronze. The image in this particular one is that same kind of wallpaper pattern that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And it was particularly referencing the Chinese influence on rare earth mining. Once again, they are buying up all these mines all over the world, and they have sort of a hold on this, sort of a stronghold on this use of mining and materials.
Is that circle, is there a picture of the mine in there?
No, not in this one, but there
Okay.
is a plate that is a plate that I got in an antique store that was a plate that was made by the British to reference Japanese porcelain. And I love the reference of colonialism with that reference. And this whole thing is based on the idea of pi and relationship of pi as a number divided. If you divide this piece in sections, you divide it by 1.66 and you will get this magic, the golden triangle, as it were,
Mhm.
out of this piece. All 3 pieces use different materials, but all have the same configuration.
That's amazing that, that you
They're quite
think
beautiful.
about.
I want you to
it's-
be sucked into them and then
Yeah.
realize that they're really talking about something quite different.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think I share that with you, Michael, and I didn't realize it. A lot of my pieces do have kind of a hidden agenda. That it's really difficult as a non-political artist to really cry about what's important to you. So if we can somehow subliminally put it in the work when people do research it or look into it a little bit more, then hopefully it's like a joy when somebody gets what you're talking about, what you're doing.
Well, that's that certain aha moment,
Mhm.
Yeah.
sort of like the Larry Bell boxes.
Yeah.
You look at them, oh, there's nothing in this thing. And all of a sudden, bam,
That was a moment for me. There's 2 big moments in my
Wow.
career, my life.
Oh, much.
One of them was when Larry Bell owns the corner. It's for those who are not familiar with Larry Bell, he does these glass boxes and he has a vapor chamber, like a decompression chamber that he does this vapor in. Well, he's so cornered that market that as a young artist, you can't even get near it. The other real big aha moment for me was I was a student of Fidel Daniele at LA Valley College. He was such a brilliant writer. He was one of the art form's early writers.
Mhm.
And he knew all of the guys. He was incredible. And he took us to Pasadena Art Museum, which is now the Getty Museum. I'm not Getty, but whatever it is. I can't think, sorry. But I walked in and walked around a corner, and this is probably 1968 or 9. There's a huge Robert Morris, which I fell in love with. And I walked around a corner and there's 100 little piles of sand with an egg on top of every one.
right.
And it rearranged like a microwave my brain. It was a Connie Zare,
Right.
and it was the most incredible. I've got goosebumps now thinking about it. Well, fast forward, 30 years, uh, Claremont College did like a 5-year survey of my work, and I found out that Connie Zare was there.
Right.
So while I was discussing the work in front of all the students, I go, you guys have no idea, but why I'm here is dedicated to one of your staff. And you would not know why, but when I start talking about it, you'll see that person. And I started talking about it, and she just broke down and started crying. She had no idea that that affected somebody so much like that. And I just say, I go, what you do and what you make as an artist can really affect other people, in ways that you don't know. Yeah, we can run through some of this stuff real
Yeah,
quick.
let's do that.
Okay, and I'm gonna do like Michael. Thank you, Michael, for the tip. This is Reinmann's redundant collapse, and Reinmann is a physicist. So what I started thinking, and that goes back to the earlier story, what I was saying about things being too big, getting small. I thought about, wow, what would a black hole be like in space that is a wormhole, and it starts sucking in the galaxies? And because I read somewhere that it would take alternate galaxies, it wouldn't take them next to each other, it would take a different one. So anyway, that was that one. And then you can move through any of the color plates that you want. And I wanted to talk to, because they're kind of in order. And this is parallel egress, which we talked about earlier. This is kind of the same thing. And then this is the structures. A lot of the work that I make, these are what I would refer to as the originals. And I put resin on the inside, and then I put Bondo and everything on the outside, and make them real hard edge. And then I make a mold of them. Because if you think about it, if you stack another one of these on that, and another one, and another one, and another one, and it has a quiet turn. So this would be like a spring or a screw. Both of these would do that. And this is an early go back to that if you would, that we went this one right here. This was turning sculpture inside out in the early 90s. I was really trying to push the limits of what I was doing at the time, and I wanted to turn the work inside out. And then you can move on to the other slides. These are the structures that are in progress. This is one of those things that I think Michael and Harold will get a feeling of what I'm talking about. When I installed this show, it was kind of, at that time, this is 1994, I had looked back on it. I walked out the gallery and I came back in, and I got the weirdest cold chill. And I thought to myself, I go, what if in the rest of my career, this is the best show or best body of work I ever put together, and I can never repeat this? And it's come really close. I think this might be the best installation in my heart of what I think I was doing. Laguna Museum owns this piece, and then I tapped it. And then this is in Korea, and I still have this. And as I was working on this, like the guys will probably know, I do a chanting as I work. I don't know how they work. If I'm doing a repetitive process, I will chant. And I kept chanting Jonah and the whale, Jonah and the whale. And I couldn't get out of my head. And I don't know what that has to do with Jonah and the whale, but that's what I did with that. And then, quickly, I think that's probably it. I think we've looked at all of the color plates. Oh, this one. I didn't see that. This is a studio shot and Peggy was saying something about being prolific. I get bored really easy, so I start working, one thing and then another and then another and then another. These are those squares that are cross sections of like a Madame X, and the Madame X is dedicated to John Singer Sargent's, famous painting of Madame X and all of the history behind that. And it's very curvy, so they are like that. And I wanted to do some shoes. Why do I want to do shoes? And then you just have fun doing different things. And I think that's a good part about making art, is if you can allow yourself to be really playful and enjoy what you want. You don't have to be restricted to what other people, think you should be doing.
I hope not. Yeah.
Maybe in a career that that you're, you have an angle of where you want to go. That might be a good thing, but I think it's much better to just do kind of what you want. you know.
So everyone, I can't imagine we've already been through a whole another hour and over. We have about 5 minutes left. I'd love to have Cecilia bring
Yeah.
up the Japanese garden tea house, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this one, Harold.
Yes, this was a project, a really special project for a client who I've done work for 30 years now. It was the shape of this was born from the fact that the Palos Verdes building department would only let you put one post in the ground to make a structure which did not require a permit. Okay, and so this cantilevered tea house is a bent tapered laminated beam with a dragon carved on the end of it. It's sitting on a foundation that's 1,500 pounds of cement, which I poured myself, and custom stainless steel bracket. And underneath the hammered copper roof is all traditional Japanese joinery to form the roof of the house, and then all of the furniture is all teak and Port Orford cedar, which is a wood from the Pacific Northwest from forests owned by the Japanese. Lots of different elements here. You can't really see the hammered copper that well, but I worked with a metal artist, and we invented a new way of shaping copper. And we actually made some tools to pull and stretch and indent copper sheeting. And there's the dragon continues on the roof. I made a tool to create probably 10,000 scales on that dragon. Every skill that I know is encompassed in this piece here.
Great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Really gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you. If you have time, I can do a couple more very quickly.
Yes, please.
Okay. So from early on, we talked about using salvaged wood. Pepper chair was salvaged wood. This is actually a restoration of the Japanese bridge at Descanso Gardens. It was falling apart. I rebuilt all of the elements of the bridge and reinstalled it. And in 30 days, a project that had to happen very quickly because the 50th anniversary only comes one time. And so I got that done just in the nick of time. It was a real challenge. I worked from the original plans of the architect, the Japanese architect who designed it, based on the Kyoto Bridge in Japan. So, and then the next one is, if you move on to the next slide, much of my wood, okay, here we go. Musical instruments are a big part of what I do. I actually repair them as well, but I love to build them using a variety of materials. And I'm always looking for the best tone that I can get from the woods that I'm using. And that's a work in progress. I'm always exploring the use of non-traditional woods for musical instruments.
You must have a good ear.
Yeah, I think so. We can move on to the next one. You can go to about the library ale house. That would be number 17. There we go. This is it's another influence of Japanese joinery. This whole front is made up of hand-cut joints, dovetails, and mortise and tenons, and everything. This actual front is actually structural, and I did this based on the design of an architect who had just graduated from SciArc, a guy named John Hirsch, who has a thriving practice in Santa Barbara now. And this particular structure actually penetrates through the front of the building and continues to the interior of the building. And it was a great project. You know, they recently painted this dark brown, which I was quite disappointed.
Oh, no.
You gotta be kidding.
No, I couldn't believe it. No, it changed owners, and they painted the wood, which didn't need to be painted. It's Nara. It's like teak. It would last forever.
Unbelievable. Oh,
Yeah, I know. You know, things get out of your control, and what can you do? You know. And you can go to you know what, I've said enough. You can go ahead and wrap it up. I've had plenty of time.
I had a question, real quick.
Oh, good.
Now,
Sure.
isn't changing an artist's work in California is illegal? So would that apply, Michael, to outdoor work and Harold with commissioned work like that?
You know, it probably does. It probably does apply. I mean, what could I do though?
Exactly. No, I know. There's like,
Yeah.
it's like when there's a resale of a work, an artist is supposed to get 5%. Well, do you know any artist that's ever gotten 5% of a work?
No, never happens. No.
Okay, guys, I think I really do actually need to wrap it up. And boy, do I wish I didn't have to. There are still things that I would like to ask, and I have a feeling there's things you'd like to say too.
Oh yeah.
So I just really want to, I'm right, Amy, that it's time to wrap up, I believe. And
Unfortunately, it is.
yes, okay. So I just want to say thank you so much to Michael Davis and Harold Greene and Eric Johnson for, this was just really wonderful hearing you talk to each other about your processes. It's always fascinating to see people that how the ways in which you are connected and the ways in which you are different. And so that was really wonderful. And I thank also Amy Erickson and Judith Blahnik and Cecilia Koger, without whom none of this would be possible. So thank you very much. It was really, really fun.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
so much.
I want to
Thank you.
thank them too. Thanks the team. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here tonight, everyone. We're going to let you go off stage for a minute, and
Okay.
we appreciate the talk we've had. It's amazing to hear how you all share together. And I'm just going to take a quick minute to remind you that it is our 40th anniversary at Angels Gate this year. We have some great, amazing events coming up, so we'd love to have you out. Next one is our family art workshop, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday on the 21st. Come up and do art with you, your whole family, anybody you'd like to do art with. And then on the 4th, we're going to have Sound Pedro. It's going to be an all outside Sound Pedro. We're bringing it back after 2 years of hiatus because of COVID. And we're excited to have you up to see almost 42 artists be a part of that event on June 4th from 7 to 10 p.m. And our last big event coming up in June is Awake in Color, a fundraiser for everyone to come and join and have a party by artists, for artists and our friends. We look forward to seeing you there. We are going to have lots of interactive and fun ideas happening at that event, including Eric Johnson is going to make another appearance with the Legends Car Club out in front of the event. So we look forward to seeing you at any of those events. Have a great night. Go do art and join us again. We'll see you soon.